Someone basically upon my mission, endless silence with stigma and shame about suicide loss, ideation, and mental health. Please, won't you join me? Welcome to Suicide Zen Forgiveness, the podcast that shares powerful stories of suicide loss, ideation, and mental health in order to break the silence, stigma, and shame. Our mission is to encourage empathy for those experiencing these challenges. Every narrative serves as a beacon of hope on to touch lives and inspire resilience. Won't you join me in this journey as we share stories to help others to find hope? Please note this podcast is for educational purposes and may contain triggering content. If you're grieving or experiencing mental health issues, please reach out to your local suicide hotline or mental health office for immediate help. And now, let's start the show. It is wonderful to be back. And today, I'm going to introduce you to who I consider a very debonair gentleman that I met through LinkedIn. And he has quite a story to tell. I am going to reiterate here that some of what we talk about today could be triggering. Please know that there is help for you out there. In North America, dial 988. Everywhere else, you can check on our pages right below the transcript. You'll find other pages that offer resources and numbers in other countries as well. That being said, I would like you to meet Bruce Simpson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, Elaine. Thank you for inviting me.
It's always hard to start our conversations because we do talk about deep topics, but more than that, we talk about things that we're still working hard to get people to bring into the light and talk about day to day. And I want our audience to know that we feel the same way everyone else does. We know that these topics can be difficult. We know that, quite frankly, it would be nice if we didn't have to talk about death at all. But we are human. And with that said, I'm going to allow Bruce to tell us his story in his own words. Let's go ahead and start, please.
Thank you, Elaine. First, a couple of preliminary. What I'm about to share is personal. It's designed to be helpful for those folks who are suffering in silence, like I did for most of my life. I'm now 74 years of age. I'm an attorney in Lexington, Kentucky. I've been practicing law for 41 years as a civil trial lawyer. I do a lot of jury trials and litigation. And I've loved the practice of law. That's never been a real problem for me at all. My problem has been a lack of self-worth since I was a little boy. I never believed I was good enough at anything. I always wanted to please others. And honestly, I still suffer from that same conundrum of wanting to please other people. But I thought I just had a Bruce Simpson personal inadequacy problem from the time I was a little boy until about a year and a half ago. And it was just something it was just part of who I was, and I would have to cope with it, and was brought up never to complain, never to whine, to suck it up, be a man, and go about your business, and don't feel sorry for yourself. Not a lot of other children have been admonished by their parents. And I adapted. I surprised myself by becoming a lawyer because I was so introverted, and before I went to law school and even after law school. And I still didn't feel very worthy as an individual up until my early 40s when people would begin to tell me, I saw your trial. You did a great job. And I'd say, really? And they said, yeah, man, you did a great job. And it felt good for the first time in my life. I felt worthy only because people told me I was a good lawyer. Honestly, I didn't believe it. Um, I really didn't. I said, I'm just faking you guys out. You really don't know how stupid I am and how ill-equipped I am. But it was still nice to hear it. And in my early 40s, I started finally feeling worthy, at least on that flimsy foundation. But once I started to feel worthy, I realized particularly when I would see another attorney that had done something wrong, stole money from a client or got involved with drugs or some other criminal activity. Not that I would ever imagine myself doing anything like that, but just to see their whole career being displayed on the front of the newspaper and on television, and they're going to get disbarred, and just the humiliation of it. I would just think to myself, man, if I was that guy, I couldn't. I'd kill myself. There's no way I could survive that humiliation, particularly now that I'm feeling worthy because people think I'm worthy. And the truth of the matter is, as bizarre as this will sound, for the next 30 years, once I started to feel worthy as a lawyer and a human being, I had a plan to kill myself if I ever perceived a threat to my reputation as a worthy person, AKA a lawyer. My identity was so wrapped up in in my profession. But I thought if I ever lost that, there would be no point in living. Now that I'm finally feeling worthy and other people are saying that I'm good enough, that I couldn't afford to lose it. And again, it may be difficult for many of you to appreciate this, but I was entirely comfortable with self-inflicted death from the time I was 40 up until last year. It was not a problem for me. And I remember about 20 years ago, my wife and I took a trip to Europe, a dream vacation. It was on a cruise ship, 2 weeks in Scandinavia. And about halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, the thought occurred to me that I might have missed the statute of limitations in a civil case. And I couldn't do anything about it. If I had missed it, it was too late. But I didn't want to think about it because I wanted to enjoy my trip and I didn't want to ruin it for my wife. But I kept thinking about it. I don't want to think about this, but my brain kept me thinking about it. I couldn't make it go away. I would think about it 10 or 15, 20 times a day because in my own mind, I had to be perfect. And anything less than perfect was unacceptable for me. I placed a great deal of importance of taking care of other people and I assumed the responsibility of being their lawyer. And I had to be absolutely 100% perfect. So I thought that I'd missed the statute of limitation. As it turned out that I didn't, but I didn't know it at the time. And so the only way I could cope for the next 2 weeks of our trip and not be curled up in the fetal position, popping 8 to 12, 16 Excedrin aspirin a day was to think to myself when this awful thought would creep into my mind that you missed the statute of limitations. I would just think, Bruce, if you miss the statute of limitations, just kill yourself when you get home. That way it'll be over. I have to worry about it. And you can enjoy these next 2 weeks of this vacation. It'll be the last 2 weeks of your life. Enjoy it. And that's what I did. Think about missing that statute. And then I would think about killing myself. And that's how I coped. As bizarre as that is, that was me. So things went along pretty good for the next 30 years up until 2022, but I began to experience some health problems, really significant health problems. For the first time in my life, I got diagnosed with a heart condition in February of 2022 and got put on some medication to try to deal with that. That didn't work, and they had to put me in the hospital and restart my heart. And more medication, they put me on blood thinner. One thing for those of you that are on blood thinner or may get on it, you really need to be very careful about injuring yourself, falling or bumping into anything or getting in a car accident, anything where there's going to be trauma to your body. Because when you're on blood thinner, you bleed a lot easier. Your blood vessels can burst a lot easier. And in May of 2022, while I was on the blood thinner, I tripped and fell. I didn't think I was bad off, but it turned out that I had a brain bleed. And I was in the hospital. I was in ICU for 4 weeks. I was in and out of the hospital 3 more times in 2022 because of the brain bleed. They had to do some heart surgery to install a device inside my heart to prevent blood clots from leaving my heart because I couldn't be on blood thinners anymore. But I would still come back to work and practice a little bit slower, to be sure. But I thought I was doing okay. And I love to work, honestly. The truth of the matter is, there are some cases, honestly, I want to be involved in so much that if I had the money and it was legally and ethically permissible, I'd pay them to let me do the case. I get so much satisfaction, particularly on underdog cases representing some small individual, small business against a bigger company. And that's something that's always appealed to me. Probably as I've learned in the last year or so, because I've always viewed myself as someone little inadequate, if you will. But I enjoyed it. Particularly when I had an opportunity to slay the giant every now and then. And anyway, so last year in January, I opened the mail in the Court of Appeals in Kentucky in a case that was a high profile case that I had won at trial. It had a lot of publicity, a lot of newspaper coverage and television coverage. And it was a big upset win, honestly. And my clients were ecstatic, and I love those people. I was so happy for them. But as I read the opinion that day, it was in January 2023, I noted that the opinion said that the counsel for the respondent had not filed a brief in the case. And I thought, what? Yeah, of course I filed a brief. I won this case. I wouldn't have filed the brief. And it turned out that I hadn't. And they reversed. I lost the case. First time I'd ever heard a client in my life. And immediately I kicked into my 30-year plan of killing myself. There wasn't any gnawing or gnashing of teeth. I wasn't crying. I had been entirely comfortable with self-inflicted death for 3 decades. But for the first time in my life, I knew I had to do what I've been planning on doing. And that morning, I didn't sleep at all that night. I didn't tell anybody. Anything I could tell anybody that I wanted to share. But my wife left early that morning, the next morning. And when she bent down to kiss me goodbye, I knew that would be the last time I kissed her. After she left, I went to a gun store. I bought the most powerful pistol they had, a .357 Magnum, and hollow point bullets that explode on impact. I didn't want to make any mistakes. I didn't want to survive. I knew of people that survived by gunshot and were in nursing homes. I did not want to have my family come and have to visit me in that shape. And I planned it just like I planned to try a case. I'm always prepared. Got contingencies for anything that might occur. You build that into who you are as a human being. After you practice law as long as I have, you're always on guard for things that might come in, and you got to be prepared to deal with not only in your trials, but in your life. And so I prepared for this. I knew what I needed to do, and I went about finishing my plan, which was to come home, wrote a note to my family. I got all of my estate documents and put them on the counter. I took an Uber to my hometown of Nicholasville, Kentucky, where I'm from. My grandparents are buried down there. My sister's buried down there. I didn't want to kill myself in my house. I didn't want my wife to find that. So I took an Uber, got out of the Uber, walked around the cemetery. My phone started blowing up with calls. My wife had found the note. I saw she was calling. My brothers were calling. my law partner at the time, one of my law partners at the time, the firm I was with at the time was calling because I'd left a text to them on what had happened and told them about the mistake I'd made. I'd also sent an email that morning to my clients and informed them of the error, and advised them to get a new lawyer. I didn't tell them I was kill myself. I just said, you need to get another lawyer. But there wasn't anything the new lawyer could do. There was no way to cure my mistake. I walked around the cemetery for 10 or 15 minutes. And even though I'd been playing this for 30 years, when you're in a cemetery, it's dark, you're by yourself. You got a gun in your hand for the first time since I was in the Army 50 years ago. I did pause a little bit to think, really, Simpson? Is this how you want to be remembered? Is this how you want to die? But then I got refocused and I said, let me make sure this gun works. It's a brand new gun. It should work, but I want to make sure because I haven't fired a weapon in 50 years. So it was a revolver. You could see the bullets on the outside of the barrel. And I pulled the hammer back and I saw a bullet rotated to the firing chamber when I cocked it, pointed it to the ground, pulled the trigger. It was loud. It was really loud. It kicked the gun, kicked way back over my right shoulder. The dog started barking all around the cemetery. I thought, my goodness, that people are going to come out and I don't want them to see me do this. So I called 911 and per my plan, and I said, there's a body in Maple Grove Cemetery. The dispatcher said, where? I told her. And she said, will you be there to assist, sir? And I said, yes. She said, the officer's en route. So I knew my time. I had to get this done. And I didn't have to, but I removed the spent casing of the test fired bullet from the revolver. It had already passed the firing chamber, but I didn't want to make any mistakes. I knew I had a limited amount of time. I had to be perfect, and I wanted to make sure I was successful. So after I removed the spent casing and put it in my pocket, I pulled the hammer back of the gun, the next live round rotated into the firing chamber. And I put the gun to the side of my head and I pulled the trigger. And the hammer hit the bullet and the bullet didn't fire. And I was dumbfounded. I was totally unprepared for this. And then the police car I see coming to the entrance to the cemetery approaching me. I thought for an instant about pulling the trigger again, but I froze when I saw him approaching me and I couldn't do it with someone watching. So I put the gun in my pocket, hoping he didn't see me. He was probably 75 yards away when I first saw him. He pulled up next to me, had the gun in my pocket. I tried to steer the conversation. I didn't have any lies to make up at the time. I was supposed to be dead, and I wanted to be dead. He rolled the window down. I said, I'm sorry. It wasn't a body. It was a garbage bag. I'm sorry you had to come out. And he looked at me for a second and said, that's okay. Thanks for reporting it anyway. And he drove off, but he didn't leave the cemetery. He drove up a little ways and parked his car. And it was cold. It was 22 degrees at the time. And it was dark and I was cold. And I wasn't going to kill myself when he was there in the cemetery. So I started walking out of the cemetery and I didn't know where to go or plans. I was supposed to be dead. Across the street was a gas station. There wasn't a bar. I could go get warm for a while until the cop left the cemetery and I could go back and finish my mission. And it was a mission. I was on a serious mission. I had been for 30 years. There was nothing. I couldn't fix this mistake. My humiliation, I could not bear walking around as a lawyer knowing I'd made a mistake and that other lawyers would know I made a mistake. And my family would be tainted by my humiliation. That wasn't fair to them. And it was my clear thought that I was better off dead for everybody. Now, I had turned my phone off in the cemetery when I saw everybody calling. I had reached the point of no return. I didn't want to be dissuaded. I couldn't be dissuaded. No one was going to talk me out of it. Nobody could fix it. It was time for me to die, and I was going to die. It was just business, honestly, at that point. So I was cold. I walked out of the cemetery and I thought it occurred to me to talk to a friend of mine, Bruce Smith, who's a lawyer in Nicholasville. we used to be really good friends, but we'd had a case against one another 5 years earlier, and I knew if I took this case, he might get upset, even though lawyers shouldn't be upset about somebody being on the other side. But knowing Bruce, he did get upset, but it was a high profile case. I wanted to be in it. My ego got the better of me. I took it, and it ended our friendship. Hadn't talked to him in 5 years. But I called him at 7 o'clock that night, and he answered. And I said, "Hey, can you talk?" And he said, "Yeah, what's going on?" And again, I had no lies to make up that were remotely believable. I came up with some tortured explanation of that my wife and I had an argument, and I took an Uber from Lexington to Nicholasville to meditate in Maple Grove Cemetery. One of the worst nights I ever told. But again, I had no contingencies for being in this situation. None. He said, "I'll come and get you." So he came and got me, and we went. I never told him I had a gun, or I never told him at any time that I was going to kill myself. And we went to a bar, and I talked for a couple of hours, and it got to be later. And I said, "Just take me back by the cemetery." I figured the cop would be gone. And he said, "Okay." And I said, "I'll get an Uber back to Lexington." He said, "Okay." So I pulled up in front of the gas station, and I got ready to get out. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to get the Uber." He said, "I'll wait." I said, "No, man, go on home. It's late. Go on home. I'm fine. Really, it'll be here shortly." Of course, I wouldn't wait for the Uber. As soon as he left, I would go back to the cemetery to finish what I came to do. There was no question in my mind about it. And I tried to get out of his car 3 times that night. And each time he said, "I'm waiting." I finally realized that I wasn't going to be able to kill myself in Maple Grove Cemetery. So I said, "Would you mind just taking him on?" He said, "Yeah, I'm on." We drove back home and came up over the hill in my subdivision. There were like 5 or 6 police cars in front of my house. There hadn't been 5 or 6 police cars in my neighborhood ever, like in the 24 years that I've been there. And they were all 5 staged in front of my house. And Bruce looked at me, goes, "What in the hell is going on?" Again, I had no lies to make up that were plausible. I said, I guess Cindy's upset." "Upset? I guess. What'd you do?" I said, "Man, I didn't do nothing. You know me. I would never strike a woman. No way." And I said, "Just don't stop." I didn't tell him I had a gun. I got a loaded 357 in my pocket minus 1 bullet. I said, "Just don't stop. Just take me up to Harrodsburg Road." It was about 1.5 miles away from my house. I'll walk back. He didn't ask any questions. Obviously, he thought something was going on. 5 or 6 police cars in front of your house. So he drove me up to Harrisburg Road, and I got out. He grabbed my arm as I was leaving. He said, "You're walking back, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm up." In my mind, I wasn't walking back. I was going to finish it. And I walked down into the stormwater detention basin. It was hidden from view, big hole in the ground. Walked down into that basin and then pulled the gun out for the final time. And then I thought, wait a minute. He just drove you 15 miles home. You spent 2 hours with him. You healed your friendship. You're telling him you're walking back. Now you're going to kill yourself. How's that going to make him feel once he finds this out? And I thought, damn, I guess I'll have to wait a day or two. I didn't want to wait a day or two, but I couldn't leave that guilty on thinking that maybe he could have done something. Walking out of this detention, and what I'm going to share with you is truly prior to January of 2023, if someone would have said to me what I'm about to tell you, I would have not believed them. I would have not believed them. And so be skeptical. I can assure you that I'm telling the 100% truth, only because as I have healed up since my suicide attempt, I have realized that there's a better path than suicide. And for me to share my story, I have to be 100% authentic, 100%. I stayed truthful. I've been that way as a lawyer all my career. When I try cases to a jury, I never lie about the facts. I never exaggerate the facts. I shape arguments for my client's benefit. That's what lawyers do, but I don't make up facts or lie about the facts. because I've learned that most people, when they're listening to someone say something, they evaluate themselves. Can I believe what this witness is saying or what this lawyer is saying? And I learned early on from a lawyer named Jerry Spence, just be who you are, to the truth. Make your arguments, shape your best argument. And whatever success I have had is because I've been credible as a messenger on behalf of my clients. So I certainly want to be credible as a messenger on the people to whom this message is targeted, which is fortunately the relatively small percentage of folks out there that suffer in silence like me, that never got help, that didn't help. So it took me a year to get comfortable with telling the rest of this. And the rest of this, is I was coming out of this basin and I got to the top of it. I had an all-encompassing sense of peace and calm, almost warmth, that totally overwhelmed me. All of the anxiety that had compelled me to kill myself was gone. It was just gone. I felt totally at ease, totally at peace. And inside of my head, I hear a very comforting message say, Bruce, you're not going to kill yourself. You're going to be okay. And you're going to be equipped to handle the aftermath of your suicide attempt. You're going to be fine. And honestly, I've never had an experience like that. And if someone had told me that prior to January of 2023, I would not have believed them, because there were two things about which I was the ultimate skeptic and ultimate doubting Thomas. One was the efficacy of mental health treatment. I didn't believe in it. I knew I was tortured and twisted in my own mind, even with my own sense of my inadequacy problem. But I thought maybe I could talk to somebody, but then I thought, how are they going to talk me out of feeling this way? That's just bullshit. Nobody can talk you feeling differently or load me up on medication and make me high. And I couldn't accept that. I couldn't afford to be high. I had to be on my game. And so I was a doubting Thomas about mental health treatment. And I was also a doubting Thomas about God, honestly. I believed a little bit, but not really. And a lot of my jaundiced attitude came from televangelists on television who I really have no regard for, because I thought they, and still think, honestly, they're just talking religion to make money for themselves, living in these expensive houses and flying around in all these jets. And so I found ways to disbelieve in God. So I wouldn't have believed what I just told you, but it happened. And I'm just telling it because it did happen. It's the rest of what happened that night. So as I'm walking home, I went and put all the bullets, emptied bullets in a dumpster. I was walking home. I was totally calm. I did peek around the corner to see if the police were in front of my house. They had left. They were out looking for me. Even the police in Nicholas were looking for me. 2 counties in Kentucky were looking for me. So I approached my house, and I knew I couldn't knock on the door. So I called my wife, and she answered the phone, and she was devastated and ecstatic at the same time. She came running out the door. We hugged. And we're back in the house. She called the police, let them know that she'd come back. And police were there, two police cars and paramedic unit were there. And I said, guys, I'm fine. I'm over this. I'm really over it. I didn't tell them I pulled the trigger, and I didn't tell them I tried to get out of Bruce Smith's car 3 times. I didn't tell them what happened in the detention basin. I figured if I told them that, they were going to take me somewhere I didn't want to go. Either. But the police officer said, look, you wrote a note. They got online, computer, saw where I went to bought a gun, or looked at a gun shop. They saw where I got an Uber, and they'd even pinged my phone when I was in the cemetery. Once I turned my phone off, they couldn't find me anymore. Otherwise, they would have found me a lot sooner. They said, we got we have to take you to a psychiatric hospital for at least 72 hours. And so I need for you to stand up, put your hands against the wall. I need to frisk you for weapons. I left the gun outside. They got the gun, but of all the things I ever imagined happening to me, being frisked for weapons, spread eagled on my living room wall in front of my family and patted down by a police officer before being taken to a psychiatric hospital was never in any scenario I ever imagined.
No.
It happened. Escorted me outside in handcuffs in front of my family and neighbors, put me in the back seat, took me to the Eastern State Hospital in Lexington, which is the longest continuing state psychiatric, longest operating continuously state psychiatric hospital in the United States, 200 years old.
Wow.
Got there about midnight. They put me in an unlocked room, checked on me every 15 minutes. I had to unlock the bathroom for me to use the bathroom. They had to be in a shower when I was be in the shower area when I took a shower, watching you constantly for the almost 4 days I was there. And I met my first mental health professional, Dr. Donald Crow, a clinical psychologist at Eastern State Hospital, who spent a lot of time with me over those nearly 4 days and got into conversations and thoughts about my life, how I thought about things that I never thought about or had a conversation with anyone about previously. They started me on some medication, released me. I started mental health therapy. Upon my release, I went and met with my clients that I'd malpracticed. It cost them to win their case. I apologized to them, gave them the statute of limitations, the date in which they needed to sue me for my error. I reported what I did to the Kentucky Bar Association that regulates lawyer conduct and started my treatment. And I got better. Shocked, honestly, shocked. Medication made a big difference. Had to be adjusted several times. The initial dosage takes 2 or 3 months for it to get in your system to be effective. And the first dosages were a little bit too heavy and it made me break the zombie, if you will. But I did get better and got my medication adjusted. And it's now been a year and a half since my suicide attempt. After about 3 months after my suicide attempt, and I started feeling a whole lot better, and I met with the Bar Association and told them what I did. I said, I really want to be available to other lawyers in case they ever get into this position, because I found that there's a better path. You don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to be afraid of getting mental health treatment. I know the stigma keeps a lot of folks away from getting treatment. It did me. The times that I thought about going to see someone, I feared I'd have to wear a disguise because I didn't want somebody to recognize me in going into seeing a psychiatrist or any other mental health professional. I was too afraid of that stigma. I couldn't accept a label myself of being labeled mentally ill. The stigma was that bad in my perception of it. And so it kept me away for almost all my life. But it took being handcuffed and taken to a state psychiatric hospital in the middle of the night after a failed suicide attempt for me to get a wake-up call about the benefits and the benefits of mental health treatment. But that hospital and the therapy that I've received since has saved my life. And I don't want anyone I can influence to languish in their misery like I did. I don't want someone to have to wait until they're 73 years old to find out there's a better way. You do not have to be miserable. Some of us are sicker than others. Some of us need more different kinds of treatment. You may have to have different kinds of medication. You have to change physicians or therapists. Like any other medical treatment, sometimes changes are necessary. But just like other treatments that are successful, mental health treatment works. It does work. And unlike some treatments for cancer or heart disease, serious heart disease, where the doctors can only do so much, suicide's preventable if you get help early and stick with it. You don't have to kill yourself. I, no one could have been more negative or an unbeliever than me about the benefits of mental health treatment. And I have lived, fortunately, only by the grace of God, to be able to share my story, the truth, in hopes that other people similarly situated and suffering as I did for almost all my life, 63 years, don't go through it, because there's a way, there's a path forward that you do not have to endure it. I'm telling you, I know it works. And so part of my calling, my mission is I still practice law. I got fired from my job, but I'm still practicing. I'm shocked at how many people still call me. In spite of being public, I've written about my story in the Kentucky Bench and Bar, a statewide magazine. I wrote about it in the American Bar Association Journal, which is a nationwide publication. I've talked about it at a number of public events, or Lexington, Kentucky, where I live, because I want to try to reach. If I can reach one person that's listening to this, I'm good. Just one. I do not have any wishes of grandeur. It's not about me. I don't charge for this. I put my number out on my LinkedIn account, my Facebook page, my Twitter account, that if you're suffering in silence, you can call 988. You can call 988 anytime, 24 hours a day. Those people are trained to help you. You don't even have to be in a crisis to call them if you're struggling. You call. I've called them. I call them 3 times a month to check on their quality, because I refer people to them and I want to make sure they're on their game. I'm going to refer somebody. And also, I put my number out there, 859-229-3436, 859-229-3436. I don't charge. I'm not a therapist. I don't hold myself out as a therapist. I'm someone who's been to a point and has managed to live through it and has managed to see benefits of mental health treatment, that you don't have to go that far. And sometimes I have found it helpful, that it's beneficial to talk with another human being who's been where you are, who's been in your shoes. I still have down days. I've just gone through one. A neighbor, friend of mine, killed himself Sunday. Devastated me. Absolutely devastated me.
Yeah.
What could I have done? But I know what I need to do. I need to put myself out there, because honestly, I should not be talking to you right now. I should be dead. But I'm not. I don't want anyone. It's a dark path you do not need to go down, and you don't need to wait till you're 73 to get a wake-up call about a sin mental health treatment. The stigma is bullshit. That's somebody else's opinion. I'm telling you that mental health treatment and mental illness is just as legitimate as cancer, heart disease, and broken bones, and can be just as deadly. Get help. To hell with the stigma. You can be helped. And things are getting better in our society. People are starting to recognize this. There's still a stigma. People will still mock people that have mental illness, make fun of them. I hear it. I used to go along with it. I was no different than them. I make fun of mental institutions and the people that work there. I don't anymore. And if someone brings up an off-color remark about mental illness, or someone that's suffering from with mental health problems, I don't be a jerk when I say something, but I respond. I just had a friend of mine about 2 weeks ago. We were at dinner with a bunch of high school kids that I'd grown up with, and we were all the same. We would make fun of Eastern State Hospital, the place that I went, saved my life. And we got to talking, and somebody made a comment about somebody that we knew about. Yeah, so-and-so is really off his rocker. And my friend Jack, who was sitting next to me, and said, yeah, he used to go to the Looney Bin, talking about Eastern State Hospital.
Yeah.
He knew I was in Eastern State, but people it's so common to mock mental institutions and disparage them, that they're not really conscious about it. And I didn't want to make him feel bad, but I said, Jack, I was in that loony bin and it helped save my life. It really did. And Jack, I didn't want to make Jack feel bad. And I didn't say it in a harsh tone. It was just a matter of fact, as lighthearted as you can be on something like that. And Jack said, oh, damn, Bruce, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I said, Jack, hey, no need to apologize. I said, you know me, you know how I said things just like that all the time, almost all my life. I said, I'm not, only reason I'm changing or have changed is because I got a wake up call being at Eastern State and it saved my life. And to Jack's credit, he said, I just got my wake up call too. So it's a learning process for a lot of people, but you do not have to languish in misery like I did. Learn from my mistakes. Don't learn from your own. You don't have to. So really, that's my story. I appreciate giving me the time to share it. In a crisis, call 988, or even not a crisis, talk to a trained mental health professional. They're there for you. Or go see a mental health provider and just share what's going on. You'll be surprised at how much help you're going to get, really. And if you want to talk to somebody who's been to a place that no human being should venture, call me, 859-229-3436. I don't charge. I keep it confidential. I don't put it out there disingenuously. This is too important. We're talking about people's lives. And I know how fortunate I am to be alive. So I'm grateful. Call me. Thank you for listening to me.
I have to say a huge thank you, Bruce, for all you have offered and all that you went through. And I just want to reference for people when you talk about years ago, people made fun of mental institutions. And as some of the audience knows, I worked in a mental institution as a volunteer from the time I was 12 years old. And I had a very different view because of that. And because we had mental illness in our family, my cousin had something like Down syndrome, but it wasn't. Janice was in her own world, and it was brought to my attention. I think I said something not proper when I was about 10, and my aunt corrected me, and that really opened my eyes. But what I understand, not just from my own experience and from others, but we make fun of what we fear. And when we don't understand things, when we can't deal with it, when we're afraid that it will somehow into us, that's when we make fun of things. That's when we lash out at others. And now we're coming to a place where we're talking about these things more openly. On that note, we will make sure that everything that Bruce has offered is available below the transcript. You will even have his number. God bless you for sharing that. The whole point of this podcast is the fact that sharing your story can lighten your burden and offer hope for someone else. We're encouraging empathy for everybody. And for me, I think it's important that we all offer to step up to listen. Sometimes that's all people need. They just need someone to listen. And if we can all take 10, 15 minutes from our busy lives and listen to another human being who's hurting, we're all going to be better off. And I think it's incredibly worthwhile for us to realize that all the humans around us are just as important as we are. And wouldn't you want someone to be there if you need someone to listen? I think it makes sense for us to step up first. I cannot thank you enough, Bruce, for being so honest and open and forthright about your story. I think we are very lucky to still have you with us. My heart goes out to your neighbor's family, and it simply shines a light on why we do this, because suicide happens way too much. And the only way we're going to be able to stop it is by normalizing the conversation so that we ask people, truly, how are you? Because the sentence, are you feeling suicidal, does not cause suicide. It can prevent it. And that's really what we're here to do, is try and prevent the next suicide. I thank you so much, Bruce, for coming and joining me. Our audience, I thank you for listening, and I ask everyone to step up to listen. Let's make sure we give everybody a chance, because I know in my heart, it would have been nice if someone had been there for me sooner. Maybe I would have learned a lesson a lot quicker. As Bruce said, it took him till he was 73. Took me till I was about 65 to figure it out. Now that we know better, let's try and do better, and let's pass it along. I'm Elaine Lindsay. This is Suicide Zen Forgiveness. Been great having you with us today. Make the very most of your today, every day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you for being here for another inspiring episode of Suicide Zen Forgiveness. We appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe and download on your favorite service and check out SZF's YouTube channel or Facebook community. If you have the chance to leave a 5-star rating or review, it'd be greatly appreciated. Please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from the hope and inspiration from our guests. Suicide Zen Forgiveness was brought to you by the following sponsors: Truel Social Media, the digital integration specialists. Let them get you rocking page 1 in the search results. Canada's keynote humorist Judy Croon, motivational speaker, comedian, author, and stand-up coach at Second City, Judy has been involved for over a decade in the City Street Outreach Program in Toronto.
The ultimate podcasting path. This is great for you if you're just starting your podcast or if you've been running it for a while. It's filled with tools, templates, and training for starting, growing, and monetizing your podcast. Get access to time-saving systems and strategies for accelerating your process at each step. Find new connections and collaborations in the uplifting podcasting community. I look forward to seeing you there.
Do you have a story to share? Do you know someone you think would be a great guest? Please go to SZF42.com. And for our American listeners, that's SZF42.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again.
And basically, no thought.